Sometimes you can really tell a lot just by looking at, say, a book's cover, or maybe just its title.
Absolutely. First impressions count, even with sources.
Exactly. So today, we're kind of taking that idea and running with it. We're focusing on how even really basic details about a source can give us some powerful insights. We're diving into excerpts from a specific source, and its title is...
And our main figure here is, obviously, Bhagvat Upadhyaya. Now, the source itself, it's not some, huge 1,000-page biography.
Right.
It's described as a Defanamen. So for anyone not familiar, that translates roughly to, what? A life introduction.
Yeah, or a biographical sketch. Think of it as the essentials of someone's life, but concise.
Concise, right? And the fact that something like this even exists for him, well, that tells us something pretty fundamental straight away, doesn't it? It really does. And what's, I think, particularly insightful here is that the source materials state very clearly that this Bottomenes of Bhagavasanupatia, it's presented Hindi language me.
Ah, okay. In Hindi.
Specifically in Hindi. That detail alone, just the language, immediately gives us a kind of unique angle, a lens to view the subject through.
Precisely. So what we're trying to do in this deep dive, it isn't really to tell Bhagavasanupathya's life story chapter and verse. We don't have those details yet.
Not from this metadata, no.
Instead, we're focusing on what we can genuinely figure out about him just from the fact that this source exists and these descriptive bits, the title, the format, the language.
The metadata itself.
Yeah. What insights pop up when all we have is that defining information? It's kind of a cool puzzle. So let's start right there. The fact that a biographical sketch about Bhagavasanupathya exists at all. What does that choice?
Yeah.
A sketch versus a full academic biography, what might that imply about him or maybe the person writing it?
That's a really good place to start. The very decision to create a biographical sketch, it suggests, well, first, that someone thought his life was important enough to share.
Sure, baseline importance.
Right. But also important enough to share in an accessible format. Aditena often seems aimed at introducing someone to a, let's say, a broader audience.
Okay, not just academics.
Exactly. Maybe the general public or a specific cultural community. It kind of implies his life story might be seen as maybe an example or inspirational or just a story of significant interest that's worth preserving and making easy to grasp.
So it's like distilling a life.
Yeah, making it relatable, understandable, not burying it in footnotes.
That difference between a popular sketch and a really dense academic work feels important. It hints at a certain type of influence, maybe more in the social or cultural world than purely, intellectual circle.
It could, yes.
Okay, now let's add that next layer you mentioned. It's in Hindi. What does that tell us? About the world Bhagavasaran Upadhyaya came from, or who this sketch was primarily meant for?
Well, the choice of Hindi is, I think, hugely significant. It immediately plugs Bhagavasaran Upadhyaya into the massive Hindi-speaking world.
Right.
It strongly suggests that his main impact or his contributions, or at least the community most interested in his story, is rooted right there in that linguistic and cultural landscape.
So his story is probably told
within the context of values, traditions, history that's relevant to Hindi-speaking regions. The language isn't just like a neutral container for facts here.
No, it shapes it.
It absolutely shapes it. It acts as a kind of cultural filter, influencing how his life gets presented, which bits are emphasized because they resonate within that specific sphere.
So we're not just talking about who reads it, but their perspective. A Hindi biographical sketch might highlight, say, certain virtues or achievements valued in those communities.
Exactly. Maybe things like spiritual contributions or social reform efforts, or perhaps literary work within Hindi literature itself.
Or history tied to specific regional movements, maybe.
Could be. It subtly gives us hints about the style of the narrative and what parts of his life are likely brought to the forefront.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if we put it all together, even without reading a single sentence of the text,
right, just from the outside,
we can start to form a hypothesis. Maybe Bhagavasanupathya was a writer, a poet, perhaps a social reformer or religious figure, or just someone deeply woven into the cultural fabric of a Hindi-speaking area.
The format Kaidile suggests accessibility.
And the language Hindi points to the cultural context. It suggests a figure whose story holds meaning, maybe even a lesson or inspiration for that specific community.
So you, listening right now, you already have a kind of framework without opening the book, as it were. There's this person, Bhagavasanupathya. His life was seen as significant enough for a concise, accessible introduction. And crucially, that introduction is in Hindi, which hints strongly at his cultural background and the primary community this story was aimed at. It's almost like seeing a movie poster and knowing instantly it's a French drama, even before you've seen the trailer.
That's a great analogy. And this basic info, the title, the document type, the language, it doesn't just give us a framework, it creates a set of sort of initial expectations.
Yeah, it makes you wonder certain things.
Exactly. It sparks more targeted curiosity. It makes you ask, how does just knowing these basic facts change the first questions we even think to ask about bhagvt, saran, upadhyaya? It guides where we might look next before we even get to the actual content.
So wrapping up our deep dive for today, we didn't just, skim the surface. We really showed, I think, how much insight you can pull just from the metadata, the descriptive wrapper around a source.
Yeah, the cover information.
We looked at those foundational bits for bhagvt, saran, upadhyaya, his name, the existence of this concise biographical sketch, the bhagvt, and the fact it's in Hindi, all just from the description of the source itself.
It really shows how much you can infer.
It's quite powerful, actually.
And maybe this leaves you with an interesting question to think about. How does merely knowing that a life introduction like this exists for someone like bhagvt, saran, upadhyaya, and knowing it specifically in Hindi, how does that uniquely shape your first thoughts?
Your initial assumptions.
Right. Your curiosity about the kind of life he might have led, the sort of impact he might have had, and the specific cultural world he came from. All of that before you read even one word of the biography itself. What specific questions or ideas pop into your head just based on that limited but actually quite potent information? Something to mull over.